What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back here with another video, and as you can tell, it is quite late at my house, but I wanted to get this video out there. It is too hot to have all of the lights going on in my room. I live in California right now, and I'm just sweating even making this video. But one of the questions that I have been seeing all over Twitch and YouTube goes something like, what class should I pick? I want to start PvP and BFA, but what class should I pick? Should I play a shaman, a rogue, a warrior, a DK, a hunter? It's like 7 or 6 different classes, and I always go back to the same answer. So I thought it'd be a good idea to make a quick little video of how I go about picking new classes for beginning players, intermediate players, or advanced players. Now, before I get into this video, just remember we have until September 4th for the official PvP Season 2 begin. So if you haven't started leveling up a character, or you want to switch characters or a different class, you still have time to level up a new character, and even then, after the season starts, you still have a lot of time to pick up a new alt or a new main, so don't stress too much about it. So the best way to begin the process of picking up a new class, you have to divide all classes in 3 categories. Everyone knows these categories, well, most people do. We have melee DPS, range DPS, and then we have healers as well. So in my opinion, if you're new to the game, you want to go towards the melee classes. Not all of them, but the melee classes will help you have a better general understanding of the game. There isn't that much you can really add to the fight other than obviously supporting your healer, supporting your range or other DPS, and then maximizing your own damage. So be sure to keep that in mind. And for the sake of this video, if I name a class that has like 3 range DPS specs for warlocks, for example, I'm not going to break down these tiers of which class you should pick based on spec, like Affliction, Destro, or Demo. In my opinion, if you want to be a good warlock, you should be able to play all 3 warlock specs, because the meta always shifts, and if you only put all of your attention and effort into one spec, you're going to feel left out when that class or that spec gets nerfed. Example would be if Destruction warlocks are doing really good and you put all of your time only learning Destruction, and then if it gets nerfed and you have to swap to Demo and you can't even play Demo, you're going to be very frustrated with the state. You're going to be very frustrated with the state of Warlock. So in my opinion, you should be able to play all 3 of those specs. Maybe you can excel at one, but have a general understanding of the other 2 specs. But for classes like Druid, where you have Resto and Feral and Balance, chances are you can't play all 3 specs. So just keep that in mind. I will separate Druids in different tiers, but for Warlocks, I'm just going to throw them into one tier. And finally, none of my class rankings are based on how good the class is currently performing. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in picking up classes that are currently doing really well. Just play what you want. There's a reason why almost every person you ask tells you to play what you want, because classes are always getting shifted and nerfed and buffed, because that's how World of Warcraft works. If a class is not doing well, they're going to buff it, and if a class is doing too well, they're going to nerf it. And this isn't League of Legends where you can just kind of swap around from different champions. You are stuck with that class unless you level an alt. So just pick the one that you want. Chances are, or most likely, it's going to do well at some point in the expansion. And while it's not doing well, you can still work to excel at that class. So I'm not going to base this ranking or this list based on what's currently doing well. I'm just giving you my starter classes, my intermediate classes, and my advanced classes based on the playstyle, not how good they are. Now, jumping right into this video, we are going to begin with our starter classes, and the first tier being the melee tier. In my opinion, and what I've talked about in the past, a good starter class for any new coming player, or even players that just want to pick up a solid class, is going to be Death Knights and Warriors. And once again, I'm not stating that they're easy to play or just easy to be instantly good at. They're just a good solid class, or they both are, for players that want to get a general understanding of the game. Mostly your role is to peel for your healer, peel for your DPS, be the tankier class inside of the arena comp or even the BG, and then just trying to maximize your damage. You will get a bunch of fundamentals from those 2 classes, because you have to be aware of your kicks, you have to land crucial kicks, you have to know how to peel properly, you have to know when to peel out and come back to your healer and not overextend. It's just a good solid fundamental, where both of them are both fundamentally strong classes that do help players develop the crucial skills inside of World of Warcraft PvP. Regardless of what anyone says, any class in WoW to excel at is not easy. It's just a good starter class in my opinion. Now, when it comes to Death Knights, if you're wondering which spec to play, Frost is generally the easier spec to play out of the 2, and you can still develop some great fundamental skills from playing Frost. And for the starter tier, that's it for me. I don't have any ranged or healers inside of the starter tier, because in my opinion, it's not easy to play a ranged class and excel in PvP, and it's not easy to play a healer and excel in PvP. So if you are new to the game, that is my opinion. That is what I recommend. There are some classes that are in the intermediate tier for both ranged and melee that might be a good option for you, but if you are really new to the game, That's my recommendation. Now, going into the intermediate tier, we're going to start with our melee classes once again. And for me, any melee class that has hybrid playstyle, where it has like a supportive role, or it has like off heals, that's going to be in this tier. Also, classes that have high mobility will also be in this tier, because for a hybrid class, you have to have better awareness to know when to off heal or to know when to use supportive spells. And then for high mobility classes, you can easily overextend and easily get caught out of position and die rather quickly, so that's why I'm putting them in this tier. So in this tier, we're going to have our Retribution Paladins as well as our Enhancement Shamans, and this is due to their supportive role. As a Retribution Paladin, you have to know when to use your off heals, when to bop your healer to get them out of a blind, or just to save them in general. You have to know when to use your Blessing of Sanctuary to break them out of things like silences or stuns or fears. And then for Enhancement Shaman, you now have things like Tremor Totem, you now have things like Earth Shield, you also have off heals, and you need to know how to kite rather well to play that class. We're also going to have Demon Hunters and Windwalker Monks. Now, Windwalker Monks, in my opinion, used to have a much higher skill cap than they do now. Now they're more of a damage dealer. Now there is some cool supportive tools that they have, and they are actually less tanky than they used to be, so you can die rather quickly. And with all that mobility, it is very easy to get caught out of position. And this goes the same for Demon Hunters. Demon Hunters are also in this tier. While the rotation might be rather simple, and it is easy to maximize your overall damage, because now in Battle for Azeroth, a lot of it is like AoE cleave. You still can just over dash or go chase them behind a pillar. I can't tell you how many Demon Hunters I played with in Legion that were just way too, over aggressive, or the word Mongo. They were just always chasing down something, always line of sighting me. And that is why I think, even though it is easy to maximize your damage on a Demon Hunter, you also have a lot of mobility, and a lot of players misuse this mobility. They use it way too often, they dash too often, so in my opinion, that puts them in the intermediate tier. And then finally, we have Survival Hunters, and the reason why I'm playing Survival Hunters here is I know some players were talking about that it is kind of easy to do damage. It is an interesting class to play. They do have a lot of abilities to press to maximize their damage, so that makes it rather difficult. But on top of that, you also are responsible for landing crucial CC with your traps. So keep that in mind. Survival Hunters are going to be one of the classes that have an important CC role. So if you do not have great awareness, or you don't understand things like diminishing returns, which I have videos on, Survival Hunter might not be the class for you. Now we're going to step into our intermediate range classes, and this is going to entail Warlocks, Elemental Shamans, and then Hunters. And then Hunters also have BM, which, they're pretty easy to play in terms of maximizing your damage, but you still have to maintain your range. You also have to maintain or, ensure that you're going to land the crucial traps. And then for Warlocks and then Elemental Shamans, you need to know how to kite, or just be comfortable getting trained into the ground. If you're playing a range class, chances are you are the focus of the enemy team, and being a Warlock, it is very suffocating. It's a weird feeling, and for a lot of players that are new to the game, they get frustrated rather easily. And I know some people will say, well, it's easy to dot everything as affliction, but still, it is a weird feeling for beginning players that they're not going to be used to. Elemental Shamans, you have to kite with Ghost Wolf, and then Hunters in general, you have to maintain distance, and then you also, once again, have to land crucial traps. So for me, there is no beginner range class. It's always going to be in the intermediate tier. Following this, we're going to step into our intermediate healers. And for me, some of the easier healers, in my opinion, are going to be your Mistweaver Monks, your Holy Paladins, and your Restoration Shamans. And in my opinion, I think Mistweaver, for me at least, and I always recommend this to newcoming players, if you want to pick up a healer, that's going to be, in my opinion, the easier healer to pick up. Going into Holy Paladin, you have a lot of abilities to press. Your healing output, or the way you heal, is rather simple, but there's a lot of cooldowns that you have to use to keep your team alive, and you can easily just misuse your cooldowns, and your team can fall behind rather quickly. You might feel smothered very easily as a Holy Paladin, and you might bubble when you don't need to. And then for Restoration Shaman, in my opinion, that's probably the more difficult healer in the intermediate tier. Once again, you have a lot of abilities to use. Your healing rotation is rather simple, but there's so many totems. There is a proper way of kiting with the Restoration Shaman. Now that we've lost Gust of Wind going into Battle for Azeroth, you have to know when to stay in Ghost Wolf or pre-Ghost Wolf certain abilities or certain stun locks on you. So for me, that might be on the upper tier of the intermediate tier, if that makes any sense. All right, now we get into the interesting part of the video. We're going to head into our difficult classes, and we're going to start with the difficult melee classes. I do not recommend these classes for anybody that is coming back to the game after a long break. Just play a warrior, get your feet wet, and then hop over to one of these classes. In my opinion, one of the harder melee classes to play are going to be rogues and feral druids. Now, everyone's going to say rogues are so easy to play. You have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry, but you don't. There are so many things that you have to keep track of to be a good rogue. It's easy for anybody in this game to maximize damage if you know how to press buttons, but it's not easy to land important saps, important blinds, important kidney shots. You have to be the shot caller when playing a rogue. And for a feral druid, you still have the stealth mechanic like rogue, so that makes it quite difficult, but you also have a supportive role, right? You have to land crucial roots. You can also off heal now with your resto affinity, and to maintain your bleeds is a lot more difficult than just to, slam rends under their targets and then use your mortal strikes and your slam ability. So overall, I think picking up one of those two melee DPS is not going to be a good fit for a lot of people. You can totally and most certainly pick up one of those melee DPS, but you have to know that it's going to be a longer road to excel at that class when compared to one of the other classes. I'm not saying that warrior is really easy compared to rogue. I know there's a lot of great warriors out there, but being a rogue requires a unique skill that some of the other melee classes just don't have. Now, hopping into our difficult range classes, I'm going to put boomkins or balanced druids, shadow priests, and I'll explain why in a second, and then I'm also going to add in there, of course, mages. Now, the reason I'm putting shadow priests in there, if you're wondering, is because now shadow priests have more CC potential with psychic horror, and on top of that, they have important silences that they have to land. But there is something about playing a shadow priest that I've noticed. First of all, it's very smothering, so it's very similar to a warlock. Usually, you're going to be the brunt of the focus by any team. Almost any time you're in a shadow priest comp, the shadow priest is the target of all the damage. So it is a weird feeling. It doesn't feel good when you hop onto a shadow priest and you have two melee just beating on you the entire time. But on top of that, I've noticed that there is a big difference, just like rogues, between a mediocre shadow priest and a highly skilled shadow priest. The damage output is never the same. I've seen some shadow priests that feel like they're not even casting anything and they're dealing so much damage because they're good at maintaining dots, and they have to be very synergized with their melee DPS or their casters of when to switch targets with things like Shadow Crash and their burst potential. So in my opinion, it's frustrating enough to play a Shadow Priest that I'm going to put them in this tier. And then for Moonkin Druids or Balanced Druids, very similar to mages, they have to spread out their dots, they have great burst potential, and then you have to know how to shift forms just like Feral Druids. Feral Druids, you have a lot of forms. A good Feral Druid will hop out of their form, go into bear form, knows when to pop their wall, knows when to go into travel form, and similar for Moonkin Druids. If you've watched Stoopzz play before, he's very good at knowing how to kite as a Moonkin Druid. Plus, you have things like Cyclone, and now we have off heals. So in my opinion, to be a good Moonkin Druid, it requires a lot of awareness, a lot of skill, a lot of micromanagement, and that's why I rank them in the advanced tier, similar to mages. Mages are by far, in my opinion, one of the more difficult casters to play. Just like rogues, or almost a ranged version of a rogue. They have high burst potential, and they're also very, very, very dependent on landing their CC when compared to any of the other casters. Just like rogues, it is very crucial for the mage to almost be a shot caller and land important CCs, important polymorphs, important counter spells. They always play, most of the time, mages in setup comps, and playing a setup comp, in my opinion, is not as easy as playing a class like an elemental shaman. Of course, to be an amazing elemental shaman, you have to know how to maximize your damage and kite well. If you've watched Oz play before, he's an amazing elemental shaman, but I still rank mages, in my opinion, as a more difficult class for newcomers. Now, finally, heading into the difficult healer portion of the video, we have priests and resto druids. Resto druids, just like all the other druid classes or specs that I mentioned, you have to know how to shift forms effectively, how to power shift, which means how to use your other forms to get away from your ally, shifting in and out of your bear form into your travel form, etc. And on top of that, healing with healing over time effects, HOTS, they don't have any real direct heals other than healing touch, maybe your regrowths, and then also your swift men or overgrowth. But like healing with healing over time effects, or HOTS as we call them in WoW, is a weird feeling when compared to all of the other healers. Plus, you can get caught out of bear form so easily on a resto druid and just explode. You also have a lot of forms of CC with Entangling Roots and Cyclone and Bash. There's a lot more key bindings on a resto druid, and I've played a resto druid before. It is not the easiest healer by far, in my opinion. It is very difficult, and similar to Discipline Priests. Discipline Priests, or priests in general, are unique in the fact that they have a lot of, they have the purge potential, just like shamans do. They have mass dispel, they have mind control, and then also Discipline Priests, a lot of the time to deal damage or to heal, you deal damage. Whereas most classes, you just heal. So it's a weird feeling, just like resto druids. You don't have like direct heals. Of course, you have penance and shadow men, but the most effective way of healing sometimes is dealing damage, and that is a weird feeling for a lot of, you know, intermediate or beginning players. So if you are new to the game once again, or you're returning to the game, or you think you're like an average healer, I don't recommend Discipline Priest or Resto Druid unless you really want to play them. I think they're great for advanced players who are trying to up their healing game. But that is just my opinion, you guys. You don't have to take my opinion. I'm just putting this video out there for the people that do want to take my opinion. If I ranked one of your classes or a class that you really like in the intermediate or the beginner tier or the starter tier, it does not mean that those classes are for noobs. It does not mean that those classes are bad. All the healers this expansion seem to be pretty decent. All the DPS and range classes seem to be pretty decent. I'm just putting this out there for people that want to come back to the game after a long time, or people who are unsure of what class to pick for Battle for Azeroth PvP. You can still be an amazing warrior and separate yourself from all other warriors. To be an amazing warrior is not easy. I would say to be an amazing warrior is going to be as difficult to be an amazing mage or any other class, because there are tiers and skill levels and skill caps to this game. This game is not easy. A lot of people make it out to be, oh, it's so easy to play World of Warcraft. Well, if it's so easy, why aren't you high rated? So just keep that in mind. This is just my opinion. I hope this video was helpful. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any more questions on my top classes or how to pick up a main, you can leave those in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Try to miss my Twitch live stream where I answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.